Federalist 59, Part 3, Publius defends the fact that the national government wants to have the ultimate word in the regulation of federal elections, because he doesn't want the states to block elections, change the time of elections, basically mess around with the schedule of elections, especially the House of Representatives, because he says that will create a national government that is dependent on the state governments and cannot do its job. And it'll be just like the old Confederacy in a way. So paragraph 7, this argument, though specious, will not, upon examination, be found solid. It is certainly true that the state legislatures, by forbearing the appointment of senators, may destroy the national government. But it will not follow that because they have the power to do this in one instance, they ought to have it in every other. There are cases in which the pernicious tendency of such a power may be far more decisive without any motive equally cogent with that which must have regulated the conduct of the convention in respect to the construction of the Senate to recommend their admission into the system. So far as that construction may expose the Union to the possibility of injury from the state legislatures, it is an evil. So see, as I have talked about it in the previous parts, Publius himself says this is an evil. But we had to make the compromise, give the election of the senators, put the elections of the senators in the hands of the state legislatures, because we wanted to tell the state governments that federal government is not taking over the power. But he says, having done that, we don't want to do the same thing and hand in the regulation of the election of the House of Representatives to them. Plus, he talks about another thing that is in the election, another thing that's in the method of electing the senators that might be a safeguard against state governments encroaching upon the federal government and trying to mess the elections up. But it is an evil which could not have been avoided without excluding the states in their political capacities, wholly from a place in the organization of the national government. If this had been done, it would doubtless have been interpreted into an entire dereliction of the federal principle and would certainly have deprived the state governments of the absolute safeguard which they will enjoy under this provision. But however wise it may have been to have submitted in this instance to an inconvenience for the attainment of a necessary advantage or a greater good, no inference can be drawn from thence to favor an accumulation of the evil, where no necessity urges, nor any greater good invites. So we admit that it was a necessary evil, but we want to make sure that it is only in one part of the Congress that we've given this power to the states. We didn't want it to go to, we don't want the states to control and regulate the election time, manner, place of members of the House of Representatives. So here he's really in a crazy way, he's saying that, yes, we accept this federal principles, that state governments have got to have a lot of power. And federal government only has those enumerated powers. He doesn't mention enumerated here, but that's what in effect he's saying. The next paragraph, it may easily be discerned also that the national government would run a much greater risk from a power in the state legislatures over the elections of its House of Representatives than from their power of appointing the member of its Senate. The senators are to be chosen for the period of 6 years. There is to be a rotation by which the seats of a third part of them are to be vacated and replenished every 2 years. And no state is to be entitled to more than 2 senators. A quorum of the body is to consist of 16 members. The joint result of these circumstances would be that a temporary combination of a few states to intermit the appointment of senators could neither annul the existence nor impair the activity of the body. And it is not from a general or permanent combination of the states that we can have anything to fear. The first might proceed from sinister designs in the leading members of a few of the state legislatures. The last would suppose a fixed and rooted disaffection in the great body of the people, which will either never exist at all or will, in all probability, proceed from an experience of the inaptitude of the general government to advancement of their happiness, in which event no good citizen could desire its continuance. So this part is important because he says, when he says only a third of senators are elected every 2 years, it gives the Senate more permanency. We're going to get to the Federalist Papers that talk about the Senate, but this is called staggered election. In other words, let's say the first Congress, every one of the 13 states, sends 2 senators. Okay, so you've got 26 senators. 2 years after the first Congress, or after the first election, only 1/3 of senators are up for re-election. Okay? So even, let's say, if those 3 are pulled out or taken out by the state legislature, there is still some permanency in the body of the Senate. So he says, yes, we've given the state legislatures but this this power, but we are hoping by the fact that only 1/3 of the senators are up for re-election every 2 years, that would not allow the states, let's say if 2 or 3 states are up to no good, it would not allow them to mess up the whole system of the federal government. The work of the national government won't be messed up. And when he says a quorum of 16, remember he's talking about a Congress whose Senate has 26 senators. He's not talking about today. And the reason he uses 16 is because you need that 2/3 of the Senate number for serious cases that the Senate has to be involved, whether it's treaties, stuff like that. 2/3 of 26 is 16, a little around 16. That's why he uses that number. So keep that in mind. But he says, with regard to the federal House of Representatives, this is the next paragraph. There is intended to be a general election of members once in 2 years. If the state legislatures were to be invested with an exclusive power of regulating these elections, every period of making them would be a delicate crisis in the national situation, which might issue in a dissolution of the Union, if the leaders of a few of the most important states should have entered into a previous conspiracy to prevent an election. So let's say if the election, the time and manner of and the places of electing the members of the House of Representatives was left totally to state legislatures, 3 or 4 populous states could totally mess up the elections. They could change the time of the elections for their members of the House of Representatives. And as we've talked before, 4 of those populous states have more than 50% of the population. So it says if those 4 decide to stop the work of federal government, they just stop the election of members of the House of Representatives, and then the whole thing will be messed up. So that is why we had to accept this evil, let the state legislatures choose the senators, but do not allow the state legislatures or states to have the final say in the place, in the election, in the scheduling of the election of the members of the House of Representatives.